All right, I'll try to go fast here since I know we are running short on time. What I want to present to you here is some of the techniques that Edison used to create innovation. This is based off a book by Michael Gelb and Sarah Miller-Caldecott, and it's called Innovate Like Edison. So first of all, you may be asking, why Edison? Why are we looking at his techniques? Well, first of all, of course, he was a prolific inventor. He held over 1,000 patents, and that was not just the light bulb, that was also the electric pen, which is basically the precursor to a copying machine, the phonograph, which is the precursor to a turntable or any music playing instruments, and the motion picture camera, which of course formed the roots of the movie industry. However, he was not just a technical innovator, but also a business innovator. In fact, he is credited with with developing the first industrial research and development complex at Menlo Park. And he was also innovative in his marketing techniques, as well as his managerial style, and his methods of continual self-improvement. So, what was Edison's methodology? You can break it down into 3 components. First of all, know your goal. Second of all, know your peers. And third, know yourself. So as far as the goal goes, this is about understanding where your solution fits into the market and what it's going to get there, what it's going to take to get there. Knowing your peers is about being able to analyze what your coworkers, your employers, your employees, and your wider network of collaborators can bring to the table to help you complete your goal. One of the things Edison focused on is that you are the main proponent of your innovation, and no one else is going to bring it without your help, so you have to unite these people around your concept. The third is knowing yourself, and that's about understanding what you do, and more importantly, why you do it and how you go about doing it. So I'm probably going to spend the most time here because I feel that as young entrepreneurs and innovators, we leave a lot of room for self-improvement, and I can tell you how to pick a good problem or how to pick the people to work with, but if you aren't motivated to go out and do those things, that is really just not going to happen. So, about knowing your goal, Edison's problem selection methods are in general going to be pretty familiar, but that doesn't mean that they're not worth revisiting. First of all, he identified gaps in the market, as we've all been shown to do, and these were ones that of course suited his academic interests and skills. But he actually also pioneered the use of ethnography, which is something that we saw from the IDEO case study there, which is going out into the world and studying consumers and their environment, how they use a particular object or how they go about their daily lives. He also aimed to create things that were good enough to gain broad appeal in the market or to be a disruptive technology, but not necessarily perfect. He understood that the extra effort it would take to make something perfect was just not worth it, and he could do that in later iterations. Third, he considered the different steps of innovation and what was needed at each of those. So we might bring in different collaborators for the steps of creating the product and than he would for the steps of scaling it up. These effects of scale are certainly something that's still relevant today and can explain why it took about 20 years for the internet to get from its origins at the Department of Defense to something that we saw in our offices and homes now. He also finally aimed to create a brand or a lifestyle around his products, not just a product in themselves. This involved various marketing innovations, such as lighting up an entire block of New York City using his electrical power just to show that it could be scaled up. And also things like providing customer service right from the get-go of anyone who got one of his phonographs. He would send someone to the person's house to have them show them how to best use the equipment, and this gained a lot of customer loyalty. So he built up a brand and made it to the style of his products. So for anyone who noticed that Apple is really credited with doing that a lot today, they obviously built that on a lot of history, and it's certainly a time-tested method. Next, you have to know your peers. You need to choose your collaborators wisely. Now, as Morgan talked about, there's a lot of focus on multidisciplinary collaboration and making sure you bring in people who have different knowledge bases, different thinking methods, a variety of different backgrounds. So I'm not really going to focus on that because I think we all understand the importance of that. But another thing that Edison pioneered, and that's worth pursuing today, is that when choosing his collaborators, he made sure that they understood what they were getting into. This doesn't always happen today. If any of you have been to an interview, and I'm sure you all have, you're all Harvard students, you realize that a lot of interviews are very standard. Everyone's kind of lying to each other and saying, hey, I'm really happy, I really want to work here. And everyone walks away not really knowing the truth about the company or about the person who was just interviewed. Edison instead preferred to throw a pile of stock parts on the floor and say, hey, turn that into a printer. And that was kind of indicative of his general hands-off method, his method of handing someone a problem and letting them take whatever solutions they wanted to get to it, or whatever methods they wanted to get to their solution. And if they didn't like that method, he preferred that. He preferred that people would selectively opt out of his company or choose not to continue on with the process of the interview, because he felt that it was better to weed them out if they did not fit with the company ethos. So this is something that you could even consider today. I know we all are not exactly the hiring managers for big companies, but even if you're working with someone that you're starting a company with, just one person, or that you're working with a scientific setting, you can make sure that your methods and ideals kind of align before you get stuck with them over a long period of time. And third, Edison had a big focus on networking. This is, of course, something that we're all familiar with, but one point that he liked to make is that you have to give before you take. In order to be able to get the most out of a network, you had to often offer them something at first. This might be, in modern terms at least, sending someone a link to an article that you think would interest them, referencing them to one of your other associates that might be able to help them with a problem, and so on. This is important because he liked to distinguish networking from other kind of advertisement techniques like marketing and PR, whereas those are targeting a particular message that's already pre-established at people. Networking is about bringing ideas back in both directions. So while you may use your network, and he had a lot of journalists, for example, in his networks that did help get out maybe those marketing and PR, that was not necessarily the main target of his networking. And finally, you have to know yourself. From this class, or even from common sense, we can say that the most creative and innovative people are those that have a broad knowledge base that can, so that they can connect a lot of different ideas from disparate regions, as well as people who have the ability to persevere through any difficulties that they face on their way to success. But just saying, hey, learn a whole bunch, get a lot of knowledge, don't give up, and for Pete's sake, stay focused. That's not really going to get you anywhere. I can't tell you what to do. So how can you improve yourself so that you can feel motivated to reach that full potential? Well, the first step, as I said, is gaining knowledge. The more you know, the more you can draw connections, the more ideas you'll have. So it's one thing to commit yourself to, say, reading a whole lot of articles or journal publications or listening to a lot of speakers, but a lot of these things go in one ear and out the other. How can we stop that? Well, Edison realized from an early age, when he went to a school and his teacher said he had an avid brain, that auditory learning was really not for him. Luckily, he had a nice mom. His mom took him home and homeschooled him, and he realized that, hey, he was good at reading books, and he was even better if he put that knowledge to use and learned by doing. So he learned that he was a very kinesthetic learner. That's not necessarily the type of learning style that will work for you, but Edison's point was simply find your learning style and stick to it. If it means being like Edison and keeping samples of plant fibers, clay, ores, various rare metals, etc., all over his library, so that even if he was reading a book, he could still be playing around with an object in his hand and learning about that object as he read about it. Do what you got to do. But that was kind of Edison's point: is know yourself, know how you learn best, and use that technique. Next, of course, having a better mental toolkit, a bigger mental toolkit, doesn't really mean much if you're not passionate about the task that you've decided to tackle. So his next task is simply finding what motivates you. This is fairly obvious, so a lot of things that Edison liked to emphasize was finding the emotional component of the problem that related to you. I think we all know to do that. On the other hand, identifying what demotivates you and how you can minimize such sources of discouragement is something that we don't necessarily think about. For Edison, that was often pessimism. He realized that having a pessimistic attitude really wasn't getting him anywhere. And he was essentially, everyone credited him with being an eternal optimist. In fact, at some point at his Menlo Park facilities, 6 huge buildings that were used for producing the phonographs all burned to the ground. And he grabbed his wife and pulled it back over and said, "Look at this fire, you'll never see anything like this in your life again." And he considered it an opportunity to install the newest factory equipment in his new factories that he was going to build. So I don't think everyone in here is going to become quite that crazy of an optimist. But that said, there's been a lot of research into optimism versus pessimism in recent years, including especially by Martin Seligman, who wrote the book Learned Optimism, and he's emphasized that optimism can be taught, you can consciously create it in yourself, and that it does lead to more success as a general result, because you simply don't, as you said, shortcut persistence and give up before you've reached the success point. Finally, I want to address the why of what we do or don't do. A lot of it has to do with what Edison called friction in the workplace. In more recent terms, people have described it as barriers, active or passive, that get in the way of what you meant to do. Edison actively worked to eliminate friction. These things were not necessarily what you might think of as something that would cause problems in the workplace, but they're just the little annoyances that get in your way in day-to-day life. This is things like making sure that your supplies were fully stocked, that any administrative stuff was taken out of the way, and so on, so that his team could focus on their ideas and experiments and not those little minutiae. So if you've ever said something like, "Oh, hey, that's a delicious plate of cookies, but put that farther away from me so I don't keep eating those cookies," you've set up a passive barrier for yourself. And that is something that Edison wants you to do. On the other hand, if you've said, "Hey, I need to write a thank you note to that interviewer who just interviewed me for that awesome job, but I'll do it later because I don't have any stamps," that's another passive barrier that you've set up for yourself, but that's obviously one that's affected you in a negative way. So think about how you can apply this concept of friction or active and passive barriers to stay focused and motivated, whether it's hiding your TV remote when you know that you've got a big project due the next day, so you think for an extra second, do I actually want to watch TV? Or something more positive, like buying a book on web design so that you no longer say, "Oh, I don't know where to start, but I really want a website." Whatever it takes, find what you need to be motivated. Eliminate those passive barriers that are getting in your way. So with that, Edison's methodology was essentially decide what you want to achieve, consciously nurture your peer network so that they can help you achieve that goal, and work toward continual self-improvement so that you're performing at your peak. And if you follow these techniques, you'll be following in Edison's awfully big footsteps in innovation.